Hello and welcome to another crochet pattern tutorial. I am very excited because I get to show you yet another installment of the Moogly CAL squares that I have been designing for a few years now. And this year I decided to be inspired by a pretty classic mathematical constant, and that is the golden ratio. So I'm going to be talking to you about how to use the golden ratio to help you make this very beautiful spirally square that we've got going on here. And it's very, very special because this is being released in the month of June. And if you don't know this, June 18th is in fact Phi-day, Phi being the number that represents the golden ratio, which is actually 1.618, etc., etc. But also its inverse, 0.618, is a special number as well. So 618, 618, June 18th is all related to Phi / the golden ratio. So that's why I was very excited to be able to release this in June. If you happen to be participating in the Moogly CAL this year, it's 2026 and it is live right now. You can go ahead and snag a free copy of the PDF of this pattern on my website. If it's outside of that window, then you will need to be able to pay for the PDF pattern, but it will always still be available for free on my blog at cockycrocheter.com. You can find all of this information in the description box below. But now that I'm done talking a lot about what the inspiration is behind this square, it is time to start talking about some of your supplies. So first and foremost, you're going to need some yarn. So this year we got a little bit of an upgrade in the type of yarn we could get. So before we only had a couple of options, but this year we got to pick a few more. All of them are beautiful worsted weight options, and I decided to go with the Knit Pick / WeCrochet Swish worsted weight because I love superwash merino. It's just like one of my favorite ones to work with anyway. So when that popped up as an option, I was like, oh, definitely have to snag me some of that. So I have 3 colors here. I have here the Dublin, which is this beautiful green, Shortbread, and Allspice. And you can get any 3 colors for this, or if you want to do more than 3, you feel free to do so. But they're going to be labeled in the pattern as colors A, B, and C. And I'm going to show you how to keep track of which one you do and how to maintain this spiral pattern. The other thing you'll need is a hook. So for all of the Moogly CAL squares, we are using a size J or 6mm hook. But I will warn that my gauge tends to be slightly tighter than a lot of other people's. So you may find that you need to go down a few hook sizes in order to match my gauge for this pattern. Or if you can match my gauge with the J / 6mm hook, then more power to you. You can continue to use that. I have here my Furls streamline in wood. I believe this is a teak wood. So I will have a link in the description box for the yarn and this hook as well. The other things you're going to need are a stitch marker because this is going to be very helpful for marking the right side of our square. So that way you don't get really turned around, because there's a lot of, making sure we're attaching at different points correctly as we make our spiral. You'll also need a yarn needle. So I've got my yarn needle case here to be able to weave in ends. It looks like you are seaming things together, but good news, this is actually a seamless pattern. You're not doing any seaming. You're just going to need this to weave in all of your yarn ends as you change colors. The final thing that I have shown here is a pair of scissors just to snip off those yarn ends. Another thing that you're going to need that we do not have on the camera is blocking mats and blocking pins, because all the Moogly CAL squares are designed to be 12 inches by 12 inches. You are going to want to be able to block this to those measurements so that later when you piece them all together to form whatever pattern you want, whether it's a blanket or if you want to put them into like, a decorative art form, it's up to you. You can make sure that all the squares come out to the nice 12-inch by 12-inch or 35.5cm by 35.5cm size. A final thing that I just want to note is that the style of crochet we are going to be doing is what's called modular crochet. It's probably something you may have heard of if you've done any kind of knitting. What modular knitting is basically you create a piece, and then rather than creating a bunch of separate pieces, you actually attach to a different part of that piece, and then you just continue to crochet off of that. So we're going to be using those modular techniques to be able to attach to each of these different pieces. So that way we're making one continuous thing instead of having to seam it all up later. Now, with all of that information and all the supplies, you are ready to tackle your very own version of this Moogly CAL square. Before I get into all of the techniques needed to make this square, I actually need to do a little correction here. So in the written pattern, I indicate that you will be doing modular crochet by joining with a single crochet. But throughout the video, I actually use a just slip stitch technique, but I did that before I updated the instructions. So what I'm going to do here is demonstrate how to do the join with the single crochet. So anytime in the video you see where I'm joining new color into the corner or something like that, ignore the method that I'm using there, continue using the single crochet join, but then everything else is done exactly the same way, like where you attach, how you work into the sides of the rows, what colors you use, things like that. So that is going to remain exactly the same. But to join with a single crochet, what you do is you actually create a slip knot with the new yarn and place that onto your hook. Then, whatever place you need to join, so if it's in the corner stitch or something like that, you're going to insert your hook with the slip stitch on it, or sorry, with the slip knot on it. You'll insert it into that corner. Then you're going to grab your yarn over, and pull it through. And then that creates those two loops on your hook that you can then yarn over and pull through to create the single crochet. So this join is what you're going to use instead of the one that I used throughout the rest of the video. So just keep in mind, once again, if you see me doing the wrong join, that's why you're going to use this one. Then you're able to continue working like normal for the rest of the pattern. So there you go. That's how you do join with a single crochet. Now to the rest of the video. All right, to begin our square, we're going to start with our hook and our color A, and I'm going to have my stitch marker ready for when I need to mark my right side. But the first thing we're going to do is a slip knot and place that onto our hook. And then we're going to chain 2. Sorry, 3, I meant 3. Huh. All right. Because what we're going to actually do is that second chain, or sorry, that third chain that we did, we're going to tighten that a bit because we're only going to be working in these first 2 chains. So this first quote unquote square in the middle is actually not going to be a square, but everything else after this is going to be worked as a square. But what we're going to be doing is working single crochets into these 2 chains. So for my first row here, we're just doing a single crochet into the first chain. And then again into my second chain. Then for row 2, we're going to turn, chain 1, tighten that down a bit, and then we're going to single crochet into both of those stitches. 1, and then 2, making sure I'm getting under both loops of that last single crochet. Then once I do that, my third and final row for this piece is just going to be another row of 2 single crochets. So I'm going to chain 1, tighten that down, and then single crochet into both of these stitches. And that is all there is to our very first square. Because with the golden ratio, one of the famous number series that is used is called the Fibonacci series. And this was, I I don't need to go into too many details, but basically it's a very easy pattern where you start with the number 1 and then you add the 2 numbers before it. Well, there's nothing before it, so you just add 1 again, but then the next number is going to be 2 because that's 1 plus 1. And so here we have basically the representation of 1 and 1 with 2 of these stitches. And then we have our little square here of 2 by 2. So we have a 1 by 1 square, a 1 by 1 square, and then a little 2 by 2 square here. If you're like, I don't really understand any of that, or I don't really care about the math behind it, that's okay. Basically, as long as you have 2 stitches in each row and you did 3 rows, you are so far correct on this first piece. But now really importantly, what we're going to do is take our stitch marker, and after we finished our 3rd row, we've actually finished on the right side. So every odd numbered row we do is right side, and then every even number row we do is the wrong side. So I'm going to take my stitch marker and just put it into one of these loops here on the front to indicate that this is the right side of the work. And then when I turn it, I can see that there is no stitch marker there. It's hanging on the opposite side, so I know this is the wrong side. So that's just a little trick for being able to help with that. But now I'm going to get my scissors here and I'm going to snip off a tail and just pull that through. That's it. I'm done with my very first piece. But now, rather than creating a separate piece, we're going to do that modular crochet method I mentioned earlier, and we're going to actually attach to a corner here and then continue working. So how we attach is very important. So since I'm doing this right-handed, I'm always going to attach in this top left corner when I'm looking at it from the right side. So I'm looking at it from like, here was my bottom, here's the top of my work, here's my left and right. So here's my left, here's my top left corner right there. I'm always going to put it there. If you are left-handed, you will have ended on this side. So this would be your right side. So that means you're going to enter into the top right corner. So that will be a way of making sure you're always putting it into the correct corner. So that way you're always starting in the same spot every time we go around. All right, back to how I was doing it right-handed here. Okay, so now that I know I need to insert into this top left corner, I'm going to put my hook through both loops of this top left corner stitch. Then I'm going to turn so that I'm about to work on the left edge here. Now, if I was left-handed, it would be on the right edge. So just keep in mind, if you're left-handed, you'll flip that around. But I'm going to start here on the left side here on the right side of my work. With my hook through there, I am now going to grab my color B, and then I'm going to take it and just carefully grab it with my hook and pull it through that corner stitch. Now I'll probably have to do some tightening here. You can also, if you want to, you can weave in your ends as you go. But for me, I tend to just save that towards the end. Here we go. Keep that green nice and tight there. And then pull my shortbread color here, my color B. And now that I have, oh, I meant to enter it through the actual full stitch here, not just through one loop. Sorry about that. There we go. Let's try that again, shall we? There we go. All right. Oh my goodness. This first part can be a little fiddly, as you can see, but it does get easier once the pattern is more established. Okay. So now that I've got my yarn attached to the corner here, I'm going to be going down the left side of my previous section. I'm going to chain 1 to secure my yarn and also to begin my row of single crochets. So that's the only stitch we're doing throughout this whole thing is single crochet. So in this first corner stitch that I did, which is the side of my row here, I'm just going to do a single crochet into that corner. And there we go. Then after that, I'm going to find the sides of the rows here, which is always going to be these single crochets on the side. So I'm going to work stitches into the sides of those rows. So I only have 2 more left because there were 3 rows. So that means I'm going to have 3 stitches on this row. So into my next one here, I'm going to insert my hook, pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through 2. That's my second single crochet. Then I'm going to go through the last one here, yarn over, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and that creates my first row of 3 single crochets. Now earlier when I was kind of talking about that whole Fibonacci sequence where it's like, you add the previous 2 numbers. Well, that's going to actually play a handy role in here because since there were 3 rows in my previous section, that means that the square I need to make is a 3 by 3 square. So I've done 3 stitches, row 1. That means I need to do 2 more rows of 3 stitches to get my total of a 3 by 3 square. So to do that, I'll do exactly like I did with my color A. I'm going to chain 1 and turn. Tighten down that chain there. And then I'm just going to single crochet into each of those 3 stitches across. Now I have 2 rows of 3 stitches. So now I need to do 1 more row to get a nice little 3 by 3 square. So once again, I'm going to turn and chain 1, tighten down that chain a bit, and then work 3 single crochets across. All right. And with that, I am now done with my next piece with color B, my little 3 by 3 square. So I'm going to go ahead and snip off a tail, pull that through. And I see here that I did end on an odd row, which means I also ended on the right side. And my stitch marker here reminds me that this is in fact the right side. So now with my right side facing, the top of my work is right here that I just finished. The bottom is right here where it was attached. So for me, since I'm right-handed, I want to look for this left corner in the top, and that's where I'm going to attach for color C. So I'm going to insert my hook into that corner stitch, grab my color C, got that right here, and I'm going to then wrap my hook through it and pull it through to join. And now, just like before, I'm going to turn my work so that I'm now working on the left edge of my previous work. And we are now going to be working along the edge of the color B square that I just made here, as well as the stitches that were along the bottom of our color A rectangle that we made here in the middle. And now, if I've done this correctly, tighten that up again. Here we go. I should have 3 rows that I'll be working into the side of, plus the 2 stitches that were made for this green color A rectangle. So I'm getting 3 plus 2, so 3 plus 2 makes 5 stitches. So I'm going to do 5 stitches across this edge. So just like before, I'm going to chain 1 to secure it and begin my row of single crochets. And then into this first corner stitch that I joined into, I'm going to do a single crochet. Tighten those things back up again here. Okay. And there we go. So that's my first single crochet done. And now I'm going to work 2 more single crochets across these next 2 rows. So there's my next one right there. And then my next one is going to be right here where it joined into the color A section. And now I've got the rest of this. So I've got these 2 spaces here are going to be for my color A section. I'm going to insert my hook, pull up my loop, work my single crochet, and then work into my very last stitch here. And you can kind of just finagle whichever looks like a stitch to you. As long as you kind of keep it roughly straight, you'll be good to go. And we can see here I've worked my first 3 into the sides of my rows that I just made earlier with color B. And then I worked into these bottom stitches, 2 of them across here for my color A. And then so color C has a total of 5 stitches, just like it needed to be. Now because I want to continue making squares, since I did 5 stitches, I now am going to work 5 rows for this section. So I'm going to chain 1, turn, tighten that, and now work 5 single crochets across. All right. And that is row 2 of my 5 by 5 square. So then I'm just going to repeat doing rows of single crochet until I get a total of 5 rows with color C. I'm finishing up these last couple of stitches, and that completes my 5 rows of 5 single crochets. So now I've got my nice little 5 by 5 color C square here. And just like before, I'm going to go ahead and fasten off a tail, pull my yarn loop through, and then observe where my right side is. So my stitch marker is facing me. So far we've always ended on the right side, which has been very fortunate for us because it means we don't have to do any kind of flipping or turning or anything like that. We've always got our top left corner ready for us to go. Now, I've done A, B, C. So now I'm going to repeat and start with color A in this top left corner. So it's always going to go A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C. So color A, I'm going to pull that back out here. So my little green color here, and I'm on the right side and entering into my top left corner, or if you're right-handed, or sorry, if you're left-handed, your top right corner. I'm going to insert my hook, grab my color A yarn here, and pull it through. I accidentally grabbed the tail of color B or color C there. Don't want that. Just want to grab color A. There we go. Okay. Tighten everything back down. Okay. And now, if you can guess, the next number of stitches we're going to be working is going to be the same number of rows that we just made, plus these 3 right here. So the rows that are along here. So we've got 5 rows here, plus 3 rows here. That's going to make a total of 8 stitches. So I'm going to work 8 single crochets across color C and color A again. So I'm going to, oh my goodness, so many yarn ends. Okay, there we go. We're going to do chain 1, kind of tighten those down there. And then single crochet into this corner again. Go ahead and kind of wrap it around those tails just to secure them a little bit. So there's my first one. And then my second one goes into the next row. And then 3, 4, 5. And then I'll have 3 more along this side. 1, 2, 3. And that will give me my total of 8. Now I have 8 stitches, so that means I need to do 8 rows to create my square. So then all we do is turn, chain 1, and keep working single crochet. So I'm going to work until I get up to my 8th row, and then I'll meet you back. All right, I've just finished working up my 8th row and I've already fastened off, and I'm now ready to begin working my next one. However, if we notice here, if we tried doing it in this top left corner, this is going to be incorrect. It's not going to continue that spiral pattern because we ended on the wrong side, because 8 rows being an even number ends us on the wrong side. So I need to make sure I flip my piece over, confirm here that my stitch marker that marks my right side is visible. Now I know in order to continue working, I can work in this correct corner here. So I'm not working in the one I ended with when I finish up this section. I'm making sure that I'm going to start here in the top left corner. So when I do that, I'm going to then just continue working in patterns. So I just did color A. So now I bring back in color B, join it, and turn to work along this edge. And this, because it had 8 rows, I will be doing 8. But then we have the previous section is the same width as this one, and this one had 5. We're doing 8 plus 5, so I'm going to be doing 13 stitches here. So if you're like confused as to how many you need to do, you can always go back to, well, how many did I do in my previous square? Plus how many am I doing in my current square? That's always the number that you're doing for your next square. They just keep adding to each other as you go. And that's the beauty of this golden, what's called a golden spiral, made up of these little Fibonacci squares is 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, then 13, and then 13 plus 8 gets your next one. You can keep going and going however many you need to go to make it as big as you want. So what I'm going to do is work up my piece until I get to a total of 12 inches or 35.5 centimeters. And then I'm going to show you the next step for finishing up your square. All right, I've now worked up quite a few squares here, and when I get to this longest edge so far, after my 7th iteration, so my 34 by 34 square, I now, on my longest side, measure pretty close to 12 inches. It'll definitely be 12 inches once I block it, so because of blocking, I can make sure, I can just get nice and close, and if I'm close enough, blocking will get me to exactly the 12 inches that I needed. So once I get to this point, I'm now no longer wanting to make more squares, because those squares will just continue forming this long rectangle, and we don't want a rectangle. We do want to finish as a square. So now we're going to do this next step where we're going to make it into a square instead of a rectangle. So to do that, we look at this longest edge here, and we can see that it's made up of the side of the square we just finished. So in my case, it's 34 plus the length of the previous square, which in this case was 21. So 34 and 21 add up to 55. That means that this other side has to add up to 55 as well. So that means that when I work on this side, I only need to do 21 rows, just like I did here, to match up. Now, 21 rows is not going to be the same as the number of stitches along here. The stitches is still going to be whatever my previous square that I just made is, plus the one before that. So in this case, it's 55 stitches. So in this side, it's going to be a 55 stitch by 21 row rectangle. So if we were continuing our pattern, it would be a 55 by 55 square, but we want to cut it off. So we're going to stop after 21 rows so that the whole thing becomes a square and not continue. So hopefully that's not too terribly confusing. Basically, the simple version is, hey, your longest side here needs to be this total. So that means your number of rows needs to be this total. That's all you really need to know. All right. Now, once I have that established, I then find my top left corner here, or top right if I'm left-handed, and I'm just going to continue working like I did before. So I insert my hook into this corner stitch, and I just finished working up color A for this last iteration. So I'm going to move on to color B. And then you're going to continue how you did. So for me, I finished after 7 iterations. So I'm ending on the 34 by 34 square here. But if you have a bigger or smaller gauge than me, you might find that you can do one more square or one fewer square and get closer to 12 inches that way. Or if you wanted to be really accurate, if you're like, well, neither square really ends exactly at 12 inches or close enough for my comfort, you can always stop at a partial square. And whatever number you stop on, you just make sure that the longest side and the other side that you're going to work on are the same length. So for example, if I stopped instead of at 34, if I was like, ooh, that's going to be too long, I need to stop at something like 28. Let's say I had to stop at 28 rows. Well, all you do is say, well, 28 plus the 21 here, that's how many rows I need to work here. And you've got yourself your 12-inch by 12-inch square. And it still gives the same effect of the little golden rectangle spiral here. So in either case, you now work up the rest of this section the exact same. This is your final section. And then after that, you'll be ready to start the border. So I'm going to work up my section here, and I'll join you back to talk about how to do the border. All right, I've just finished working up the final modular section here where I did only the 21 rows to make it a nice, perfect square. And now I'm ready to begin working on the border and the finishing touches. So I just left this yarn here. To do the border is actually pretty simple. You could choose to do it in a solid color all the way around, or you could do like what I did, which was I kind of matched which color would go along here in the order that I would have originally done this. So for example, since I finished this section in color B, if I were to have joined and worked along this side, my next color would have been color C. So actually what I would do is I would start my border in color C along here. Then when I move, the next one would be color A, and then B, and then C again, all the way around. So that's kind of like, you know, just a little tip to kind of keep the color scheme going if you wanted the border to match. Or if you don't want to do all of that, you don't have to. You can just stick with a single color that you just really like and make that your final border color. But in either case, you're going to work the border the same way. If you want to stick with the current color, you don't actually have to fasten off like I'm doing. You can just continue with the strand of yarn on your hook here. But because I do want to change it to color C, I'm going to go ahead and snip that off. And we're going to stay on the right side here. And I'm going to take my color C, and I'm just going to join it like I would normally when I'm starting a new section. Okay, and then I'm going to chain one up. And then what I'll do is exactly the same as what we've been doing so far. I'm just going to work a single crochet into the side of each row down. Making sure I'm tightening everything up here. There we go. Yep, and then I would just work like that until I got to the corner down here. Okay, coming up here to my corner. And in this corner here, we're going to be working actually 3 single crochets because we'll have one here for the side, one here to represent the corner, and then one here to begin working along the other edge. But because I do want to transition to the next color in my sequence, which would be color A, I'm actually going to show how to transition from color to color in crochet. So I'm going to say that my center stitch is going to remain the same color I just did, but then I want to transition to my color A here. So color C is the one I'm going to end. So I'm going to go ahead and fasten that off before I finish the stitch, because if I were to pull this color through, then that would show that the next color here would be color C. But I actually want that color to be color A. So I'm going to pull through with color A, which completes this final single crochet here in color C. But then the next stitch I work is going to have this strand of green in it, so it's going to stay clean and consistent. Otherwise, there can be a little bit of that mixture or drift of color into different stitches, and it just doesn't look as sharp. But once you do that, you're then ready to finish working that final stitch here in the corner. in my new color here. There we go. And now we can see there that color A is now the new color that I'm going to be working. The tops of the stitches match up nice and cleanly, and there's this nice little vertical split between the stitches there. Okay, so once you do 3 single crochets into your corner, you're then ready to turn and just start working along the bottom here. I say bottom, they're along the sides because there's really no like bottom or top to this because we keep working in a spiral, so the bottom and top keep moving. Wow, that stitch is a little tight there, but there we go. Eventually got it in. There we go. Okay, so then that's really all there is to it. So you basically just work around with your border, working the edges the same as you did when you were making your modular section. So you were already really practicing for the border the whole time. Only difference is that rather than stopping at the edges, you're going to be doing 3 single crochets in each corner. And then when you get all the way back around, you'll simply fasten off, slip stitch these together to form the final join, and then you're going to weave in your yarn ends. So I'm going to go ahead and actually show you my favorite technique for weaving in ends, because there are a lot of these, and you know, regardless of your method of weaving in ends, it is going to take you a little bit of time. However, I do want to show my favorite method here because I think it goes pretty quickly. I don't have to think too much about it. And it makes for a very secure yarn end weaving. Okay, so the first thing is you'll, of course, you know, weave in your thread your needle with your yarn. And then what you're going to do is I basically call this like to and fro, like a forward, back, forward. So you basically just kind of find like where it looks like it's kind of wrapping a little bit of a tunnel. So like your stitches might form like a tunnel kind of like along here, along the bottoms of the stitches where the loops all wrap around the previous stitches or something. You don't really have to think too deeply about it. Just, you know, find some place where it looks like your stitches will just kind of hide. So I'm going to go through and just thread my needle through one of these tunnels that I identify. So I've got this like series of stitches here that form a nice tunnel, and you can't see my needle through the other side, so we know it's going to be nice and hidden. And I just do like a little length there, and then I just pull my yarn through. Then, once I go through the tunnel one time, I will then find a loop. Oh, got a little bit of cat hair there. Oops. I'm going to find a loop and just kind of go through it to wrap my yarn around the loop. Just to grab it so that it can do a little bit of a U-turn. And then I just push the needle back through that same tunnel that I just came through. And I can come in and out of the same spot or different spots, it doesn't really matter. As long as I'm basically going in the opposite direction, that is good. There we go. And now what I might do is go ahead and do one more pass where I go around one more loop and then go through that tunnel. And then pull it through maybe like one of the tighter spots there. And there we go. And then you just kind of like stretch and pull to settle the yarn end in. And what this does is because the yarn is going in 2 different directions and moved in 3 times, no matter which way your fabric gets tugged, the yarn is always staying in place, because as it pulls one direction, well, part of the yarn is going to try to go this way, but then the other part just kind of moves with it. So it like stays in place. So it's actually a really nice, neat technique. And because they are through the same area, the friction of them also keeps them together more easily. So they don't just slip in and out of where they were woven in. And then you just fasten off the end there, do a little bit more of a tug, get it settled in, And there you go. Notice you cannot see where I wove in my end on the wrong side or the right side, and that is not coming out. So those are all the techniques you need to be able to finish up your own Phi-day square, your T.G.I Phi-day square. I hope you really enjoyed this tutorial and found it helpful. If you did, please go ahead and give it a thumbs up to let YouTube know that you like it. And while you're at it, go ahead and hit the subscribe and the bell notification so that you can keep up with all of my other patterns as they come out. Thank you very much for joining me today, and I hope you have a wonderful day.